everyone. My name is Bradley Crooks. I'm Head of Digital Entertainment and Games at BBC Studios. And today, Michael Angst from Eline and myself will be talking to you about Beyond Blue. Through our BBC Landmark series, we seek to bring audiences closer to the natural world, connect them to the environments and animals around them, and to tell stories that resonate personally with each of us. Blue Planet 2 launched at the end of last year to critical acclaim, reaching over 37 million people in the UK. That's about 62% of the population, by the way, and hundreds of millions of people worldwide. It brought us stories about our oceans that haven't been told before through new technology and new techniques that were first for TV. It was the culmination of 1,200 hours of underwater filming across more than 200 shoot days. But the story for Blue Planet 2 itself started a long time before it came to the screen. Many of our landmarks are years in the making, and during that time we started to look for ways to extend the story beyond television. Just as the TV series uses developments in technology to film the natural world in new ways, we believe that other media give an opportunity to engage with the content and offer a fresh perspective. We felt a game would allow a unique insight into the oceans in a way most people wouldn't otherwise be able to do. This led us to a conversation with Eline. We, along with everyone else, had been impressed with what they'd done with Never Alone, how they created a quality gaming experience, treated the subject matter sensitively, and perhaps most importantly, told that story so successfully. And so here we are today. Michael will take you through the game now and how Blue Planet 2 has helped us to bring that story to life.
The pretty pictures. So I'm Mike Angst. I'm the co-founder of Eline Media, which is a developer and publisher that tries to make games that celebrate the real world. We think the world's a pretty awesome and magical place, and we think that one can get cozy with it, maybe understand it a little better, and maybe even be motivated to help shape it in a positive way. So we make independent games for meaningful entertainment. In the case of getting the call from BBC, we were just really, really excited to be able to do something that was thematically resonant with what we did with Never Alone. For those of you who don't know, Never Alone was a game about Alaska Native culture. It explored themes like interdependence, the connection between humans and the natural world, the spiritual world. And really, it was a game in which you had to depend on each other. You had two characters that you had to play through the game in order to complete it, and it told a story that had survived for 1,000 years. When we had the opportunity during the production to get a sense for the themes that were being explored in Blue Planet, and we're really excited to see the prominence of scientists in the series, and what are the big questions that they're asking, what makes them excited to study the ocean, and why do they think that right now is the beginning of sort of a renaissance of being able to explore the ocean? What kind of emerging technology is happening? And so as they invited us in, we started to meet with some of the scientists that were behind the production and really ask them the question of, what do you think in 10 or 15 years are the major questions in the ocean? Is it a happy time for us? What kind of technology do you think will enable you to learn more about it? And more importantly, if you had a moonshot budget, if you had the ability to sort of explore the ocean the way that we have explored space, how would you spend that money? What questions would you ask? What do you think you'd find? And why would you be moved, or we would be moved if we were along for the ride with you? And we made a decision to really have the game build upon the last episode of the series, which looked at the question of the scientists and the interaction with the natural world and how it affects how we think about the planet and being a custodian of it. So we're going to transition. We'll show you a trailer from the game. We have the game over on the floor. So if you want to come swim for 5 or 10 minutes with us in the game and see what it's like to be inside it, we invite you to do that. But we'll give you a sense of some of the backdrops, the places we'll go, and the creatures you'll meet in the game. So as we switch back, one of the key questions that we wrestled with early in the creative concept for the game was what perspective to play it from. You know, did we want to be a person? Did we want to be a creature? Did we want to see it all from sort of a first-person, intimate perspective? Did we want to experience it as a human, sort of out of our element and in the context of the creatures around us? And so wherever we would get to a place of decision, we would try to talk to the filmmakers behind the series. We'd talk to scientists, pour over what we found ourselves moving about the series and some of the footage that we were able to observe otherwise. And we kept coming back to images like this, you know, sort of seeing the human in context. And when we talked to scientists about the emergence of technology and the importance of technology for them being able to get to places that are really hard to get to in the ocean, whether they're deep or hot or whatever, they would all long for wishing they could get there by themselves and not through the camera that was on a drone or not behind the glass of it. And it wasn't necessarily because it makes for better science as much as these folks are explorers. They want to witness the beauty and the magnificence of it. They want to be there. So we made a decision that a good part of the game would, in fact, so that former was a shot from Blue Planet, this is a shot from the game, that we would play a significant portion of the game from the perspective of this female scientist named Mirai that you saw in the trailer, and that we would do it in a third-person perspective so that we could see the human against the natural element. We could observe how the creatures behave differently as the machines and the drones are moving around, making their noise sometimes, and how they react to an organic being in it. We could see things like scale, and we could just give a sense of being there. We'll also, though, take advantage of the perspective of technology. This is a shot from Blue Planet 2 where they're in a pretty hot place. They're in a place that wouldn't be a great place to be in just a suit and in a scuba diving outfit. It's called a brine pool, which is basically a lake under the water. That's a shot of a lake in the ocean, essentially, and that's very salty water that's there. And there's crazy stuff to learn there. This is very close to what we believe was the origins of life. These are near thermal vent areas and, you know, really hot stuff. So you will also get an opportunity to control the ROVs, to control the drones in the game. And so that will put you in a first-person perspective. And when you're in that first-person perspective, you're controlling these devices, and we'll have them at different scales and different capabilities. Some very tiny, fast, nimble ones that are able to sort of follow a creature without being intrusive and disrupting behavior. Drones that are good at picking things up. And the idea is that from the safety of your sub, you can choose to monitor your drone cameras and be able to jump into the perspective of that drone, basically teleporting into that particular place. In terms of the theme and the setting and sort of what are the conditions of the world when we enter it, we decided to set it a little bit in the future. Again, part of that was it allows us to imagine where things go and to have some fun with that, to be able to play with real-world places and real-world stakes, but not necessarily be bickering about exactly how it is right this second. Yet all the science will be based in our researchers' recommendations, and all the natural behavior will be authentic. In our world, it's very similar to the world now. It's just a little more extreme. The places that are thriving in our world are a little better. They're thriving a little more. There's been some conscious action that's allowed for things to make things better. But the things that put pressure on the ocean are still there, and they are probably a little more advanced as well. And so our game will have some sorrow. It will have some joy. And in particular, we'll take advantage of some of the things that the series first documented. This is actually a shot that's from a place that has rebounded significantly in the Arctic Ocean, and where there's a massive herring population that used to be dwindled, and where now we're seeing really cool interactions between creatures like humpback whales and orcas that wasn't observed before because the conditions are different, and you know they're able to document that behavior. So we'll have similar experiences in the game. What we'll tend to do, what we decided was really to try to reference this as a jumping off point, so that we weren't replicating the knowledge and the storytelling that was in the series, but then use that naturally occurring observation to create a point of drama or point of narrative in the game. We thought it was super important for you to be embodied as a person in a personal situation. And the way the game plays, you will get to make some pretty morally complex decisions that will affect the state of at least the world around you. And you'll see the role of a scientist and the leverage that science has in a modern, globally connected, media-consumed world. It's not meant to be super heavy, but it is meant to embody those decisions and to present you with questions like, how certain do you need to be before you publish a finding about something that might be controversial? Should you intervene if you think you can in the natural world to make things better, even if it is an evolution of the natural world that we think is natural and not necessarily impacted by humans? How do you know whether that intervention is going to go wrong or have unforeseen circumstances? So we want to play with those kind of morally complex questions. We want to make it very local, and we want to use the advice of the scientists that were behind the series and behind the game to help us choose things that they think are relevant and topical, but also things that, as players, you might be interested in engaging with. We're looking for a game that will be available on PC and console in early 2019. Much like we did with Never Alone, as you achieve things in the game, as you advance, part of your reward you'll unlock little mini documentaries, and those mini documentaries will be powered by the Blue Planet 2 production, including a fair amount of footage that you haven't seen before and might shed light on things that were not in the series. So that's the game. Those are some of the challenges we faced in it, and if you have any questions, we'd be happy to take them. Yes, sir.
How do you balance the educational aspect with the actual game?
Yeah. I mean, I think very similar to the way we see something like the series succeeds, where the storytelling in a lot of ways carries the experience. I mean, for us, we try to first just base it on the real world, to try to find a context that we think is relevant, and to choose mechanics and decisions that give you player agency. That means that engaging with the material is probably necessary for you to succeed, and then we make the best game we can that's as entertaining as possible. So, we don't worry about, well, how much are you going to retain about the whale sharks that you experience, but if in the game, understanding a little about the whale shark is key to, say, a morally complex decision you have to make about them, our expectation is you'll have engaged enough with it in the material, and our job is really to localize that and to create something in which you're excited to find those clues to the mystery. And we think, there are great Hollywood films based on reality, real stories that have done that, and we strive for the same thing.
At what point did you, because you mentioned you kind of came into the project as the sort of series was still being produced, so was that something, and I guess this might be for the BBC side of the room, but was it something that, as you went into this, we definitely need to have a video game element to this, or did it kind of come as you saw the show develop? At what point did you decide to kind of bring the kind of game into it?
That's okay. That's good. Yeah, it's a good question actually. Increasingly, we are thinking beyond the TV screen when we sort of look at franchises like Blue Planet 2 and before that Planet Earth 2. But we felt there was a particularly good opportunity through some sort of a gaming experience to continue that sort of dialogue with players about the natural world and give them access to I guess to kind of engage with the content in a way that maybe they wouldn't otherwise have been able to do. I think what's really interesting with Eline is that in terms of kind of what they're trying to achieve in terms of their objectives is very much in line with what we're trying to do with the series, which is it's about sort of engaging people with the content. It's about information. It's about kind of education, but it's also about entertainment, and that's something that's very kind of key from the Landmark series point of view. Is sort of it's not just about telling people about the facts; it's about educating them as well, because that's a great way of engaging people in the content. And I think we felt that a game from an early stage would be a good way of doing that, but it wasn't until we started the conversation with Eline that we felt like we had a good way of approaching that.
Were Eline like kind of first in because of Never Alone? Were they kind of like first in the list to go to? Like you didn't look at, I don't know, Epic or someone?
We were the only call.
Do you know what? I think, though, you might have been, actually. In this particular situation, we felt that they were a very good kind of potential partner, and that's proven to be the case, actually. So I'm sure at some time we did talk about kind of like different options, but once we'd started talking to these guys, we found we didn't need to go any further.
You obviously had a wealth of footage and knowledge to lean on when making this game. Like, how impactful was that during production? What would Beyond Blue have looked like if you had no access to what BBC had to offer? Like, how far off the mark might that game have been?
So, I mean, one of the reasons we embraced the project, besides getting to work with the BBC on something as special as the successor to Blue Planet, was the process that they go through is, quite frankly, much more robust and extensive than we can afford to do for our games, and we take that very seriously. And so we did about a year of collaboration and documentation with the folks from the Alaska Native culture when we made Never Alone. We weren't making any game. I mean, we had a team going through an immersion to understand how to plan, pick a genre, and they had 30 people from the community who went through essentially the entire game-making process with us. It was a major commitment of resources. And so doing it on the back of a multi-year production that utilized scientists to guide it, and really to get to how one instruments this vast ocean to be able to find and observe the things they find was huge for us. And so it gave us something to look at and reflect on from a thematic perspective. It gave us, a wealth of ideas on mechanics and the technology that we could use in the game. And on a very practical level, much of these creatures in the world is not actually well documented. So to try to do animation references, to try to understand, well, how does it feel to be near sperm whales? This is, some of the best references in the world to do that. And so I would say at a strategic level, it was critical in terms of choosing the themes, and at a tactical level, saved a huge amount of time in terms of being able to handcraft something with that kind of visual reference.
Any other questions? All right.
Sorry if you already covered this because I wandered in a little bit late. In regards, you gentlemen mentioned science. How much of the gameplay in what you get to do in running your experiments or exploring your mysteries involves real science or is close to the real thing? Or is that something in there without compromising the fun? You said like, we don't want to sort of have all the minutiae of the whale shark, for example, but as long as you take something away. Do you have essentially sort of interactive real science, or do you have an element of that? And if so, how strong is it?
So it's a great question. It is a mystery-solving type of game. So there's a narrative center to it. And the exploration you do is what builds the clues for you to make the decisions that you make later. A couple of key stakes that we put in the ground early to try to find that line. One is, whereas in the BBC experience, they actually advanced science. They actually had researchers that had original discoveries, that found new behaviors. We're choosing not to feature that, and primarily because we actually think that there's plenty to have exciting opportunities with what we already know and just feature in a way that's provocative. And so we might take a behavior that has been observed recently and is new to science and position that as a significant behavior in our narrative, and we set it differently. I mean, we're observing the behavior in a different setting. That was huge for us, and so making a game that primarily asks the question of, why is this happening here now, as opposed to what do creatures do, just gives us a completely different lens. And so much of what you'll do in the game is try to understand behavior right now from these creatures and why, and then ask those questions that are interesting and mysterious around that. And in terms of minutia, we give you the flavor of using the scientific equipment. So, we look and we say, well, how will we have wireless networks under the ocean in 10 or 15 years? And that's how you'll have wireless networks in our game. We try to shortcut the process of making you go through double-blind studies and things that would ultimately do it. So you'll draw conclusions with a lot of narrative time gaps, but we will give you the feeling of observing something and having to decide whether you are certain about what you observed before you released your finding in the narrative.
Any other questions? Okay. All right, I guess we're done then. Okay, well, thank you very much, guys. And once again, you can play the game, and well, you can ask them any further questions. They'll be at the front in just a second, or you can go and see the game over on the show floor in the rest area. But if you could give them a bit of applause, thank you.
Hall 7 by the restrooms if you want to come find us.